All right, here's a serious question. Did you hear Laurel or Yanny? If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's probably a good thing. So, it's kind of like the blue or gold dress kind of situation, right?
No,
it was Laurel. I think it was Laurel too. Anybody heard Yanny who's just out of their mind. Exactly. So, who got up early and watched the royal wedding? Anybody want to admit to that? Wow. Interesting. You know, all you got to do if you're on Twitter, I mean, you can just rewatch anything because everybody's going to just take videos of their TV, and all you got to do is just if you can have the patience to scroll enough through Twitter, you can watch the whole thing right there. And I watched the whole thing in 5 minutes just doing that. So, but so yeah, it was interesting. You know, there was a pretty good preaching going on. I don't know if you heard that or not, but so he did a great job. So today is Pentecost Sunday, and it is the birth of the church. Acts chapter 2, on the day of Pentecost. It was on the day of Pentecost that the church was filled with the Holy Spirit. You ever in need of something supernatural? You know, a physician tells you that she is concerned with the x-rays, and you need a peace that passes all understanding. Or the phone rings in the middle of the night, and a desperate voice is speaking to you on the other end, and you need words of wisdom. You become the target of personal attack, and you need a love that restrains revenge. You're faced with a life-changing decision, and you need to know God's will. You know, when the boat is rocking, we need a God that can calm the storms. When the enemy is at our back, we need a God that can part the waters. And when our strength is gone, we need a God that can conquer enemy armies. When we feel inadequate, we need a God that is more than adequate. For 3 years, some of Jesus' closest friends walked by his side. They got a front row seat when the blind were given sight, and the lame were made to walk, and even the dead raised. For 3 years, they traveled with Jesus along the dusty roads of Galilee. And now they witness as his bruised and battered body hangs from a cross. They watch as a spear is thrust into his side, and they see his lifeless body wrapped in burial clothes and placed in a tomb. But before all of that, he gathered his closest friends, 12 of them, in an upstairs apartment. And he reminded them not to fear his leaving, because, as he says, I will ask the Father, and the Father will give you another advocate to be with you forever. He says that this is actually a part of the bigger picture. This is a part of the plan. Because if I don't go away, the advocate will not come to be with you. 3 days after his death, Jesus is resurrected. And it's after his resurrection that he will say, I am sending upon you that which my Father has promised. So fellas, stay right here in this city until you have been clothed with power from on high. So they wait. Under a cloud of suspicion from the religious leaders, they wait. As Roman guards roam the streets trying to put an end to this Jesus revolution, they wait. They wait. Now, they're not exactly sure what they're waiting for, but they wait. Then it happens. A mighty rush of wind sweeps through the house, and it brings with it a gift of new language. They didn't hear Yanni or Laurel. What they heard was the sound of a mighty rushing wind. The witnesses there describe it as divine fire resting upon each person. The Holy Spirit shows up and the whole world is turned upside down. Jesus is proclaimed with boldness through the lips of a man who just days before had cowardly denied him. When the crowd of people heard the message that Peter was preaching, they respond by saying, "What shall we do?" And that is from the same crowd that witnessed Jesus' violent death. Peter saw all that was happening, and he looked at it through the lens of the Old Testament prophet Joel. And Joel envisioned a time when God would declare, "I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions." For the early church, Peter says, this is it. This is the time. 2 years after we moved to Canton, Georgia, we had a big storm come rolling through the neighborhood. The tornado sirens went off, and we headed to the basement, to our designated spot behind the stairs. In my stupidity, I went because I had never seen a tornado before. So I went around and opened up the garage door, not the big garage door, the little door that went outside to the backyard, and I opened up that door just to look, and there it was. The clouds were just swirling around and around and around. And I stood. I was almost like I was mesmerized by its power, just in awe of its power. That is, until my wife brought me back to my senses and told me to shut the door and a few other things and come on in and hide. We didn't know what to expect. When the divine fire of God fell on the people, they didn't know what to expect. It was unexpected. They didn't know really what they were waiting for. They were just told to wait for a promise. The disciples were in awe of the Spirit's power. And what they discovered, and what I hope that we will discover as the church, is that when the Holy Spirit shows up, life gets unexplainable. And after Pentecost, the church from that point on, after Pentecost, they were determined that their life would be unexplainable without the power of the Holy Spirit. And I hope it would be the same for all of us as followers of Jesus. I hope that we could all have that same declaration that my life doesn't make sense without the power of God working through it. When the divine fire fell on those first followers of Jesus, they took it to mean that they were loved deeply and they were being sent to love wildly. They spoke truth to power. They sided with the vulnerable. They spoke with conviction, and they let love replace their fears. 2,000 years later, we are once again in need of that divine fire. A fire that will consume hate. A divine fire that will bring bigotry to ashes. A divine fire that will stir up the holy imaginations of our sons and our daughters and our young and our old to dream new dreams and to catch a vision of what God's future is all about. We are in need of that divine fire once again. And if I can just be really real, what we need is more divine fire and less gunfire. Our hearts were broken once again this past week when a student opened fire on his classmates, killing 9 students and 1 teacher at Santa Fe, Texas. Listen to me. We need a divine fire to stir our imaginations to consider that there is another way. Jesus carried a cross, not a gun. He's the Prince of Peace in a world of violence. When he told Peter to put away his sword, he told his followers that violence would not be the way of his kingdom. We need the divine fire of God's Spirit to show us another way. We need the courage to protect our children. Oh, Holy Spirit, come and set us on fire. We need a divine fire that turns political cowards into courageous leaders. We need a divine fire that sets preachers on fire and sends the world to watch them come and burn. We need a divine fire that unsettles the settlers and disrupts the comfortable. We need a divine fire that shakes the complacent and humbles the arrogant. We need a divine fire that sends us forth from the church to show the world what divine love is all about. Oh, Holy Spirit, set us on fire. We need the divine fire to reignite hope. We need the divine fire to spark joy. We need the divine fire to burn away the hardness of our hearts and turn us as a church into healers, forgivers, and peacemakers. Holy Spirit, send your fire. We need the divine fire that's going to pry us off of church pews, set our feet in motion, and send us out into the world with a divine boldness to proclaim the redeeming work of God. Oh, Holy Spirit, set us on fire. The story of Pentecost takes us to the heart of the church that Jesus envisioned. A church that turns the world upside down with his mission of love. As Bishop Michael Curry said in the sermon at the royal wedding yesterday, if humanity ever captures the energy of love, it will be the second time in history that we have discovered fire. Oh, Holy Spirit, set us on fire. Imagine what would happen if the divine fire gave us a vision for a better future. Imagine a time when our children fear for their lives no longer. Imagine if our lust for violence was transformed into a passion for peace. Imagine if we had the courage to not waver in the struggle for justice, to be relentless in that pursuit of peace, and to speak fearlessly into the powers. Imagine if God's people were set ablaze with divine fire. Where would it take you? Oh, Holy Spirit, set your people on fire.